Hard to believe it, but this field is a bit of a hit with archaeologists. Not when it's like this, obviously. But when it's like this, it's a real belter. Because over the years, it's produced metal brooches, beads, studs, and loads of pottery, including this. It may not look much, but it's actually part of a 6th century cremation urn, a classic sign of the complex burial practices carried out by the Anglo-Saxons. So if there is a Saxon cemetery here, can we find it? And if we can, what else might be down here? And most importantly, what will it tell us about the way our ancestors treated the dead? We're spending the next 3 days in the rich agricultural landscape of southeast Leicestershire. Over the years, these fields have been investigated by archaeologists as part of the Langton Brook Survey, and they found all sorts of evidence of Anglo-Saxon activity. And we've now used their results to focus in on 2 of the most intriguing areas hidden amongst these massive fields.
Yeah, that's the first bit, as I'm aware of, that's actually come out of the trench.
Yeah.
Where is a pottery expert when you most need him?
We've got some prehistoric flint, a whole mass of Roman late Iron Age pottery.
Well, I know exactly where he is. Up the hill at Rackshaw's Trench, where he's now confirmed the ditch is Iron Age. But what's more, it was visible right throughout Roman times and on into the Anglo-Saxon period.
We have got 4 sherds of early Middle Saxon handmade pottery, so we've finally found what we're looking for.
So we've got a bit of everything, really.
Well, the interesting thing is the Saxon pottery all seems to be coming off the top of the ditch.
Right.
Now, you do sometimes get Saxon sunken featured huts actually dug into the top of ditches.
Yeah, well, there we are. It's your task for tomorrow.
I'll crack on then.
Come and have a look at this.
It's the same confusing story in Phil's Trench.
In here, look, we've got this, you see, look, there you can see the edge of it going along there and back round here. It's a big square feature. Now, is it a pit? Is it a grave? I really don't know. But the stranger thing is, look here, we've actually got what looks like a beam slot.
What's a beam slot?
Well, a beam slot would be a foundation for a building. So is it actually a settlement? I don't really know. One thing I do know is we've actually got pottery, which somehow or another, I'm sure it's got to be Saxon.
This is really intriguing. It looks like we might have evidence of where the Anglo-Saxons lived in a cemetery. What were they doing living in a cemetery? I really don't understand this site.
The animal art here is really good, really crisp, really well made.
Yeah. The metalwork we've discovered, like this belt fitting we found yesterday, says Anglo-Saxon cemetery.
These things attached to the gaudy kind of heavy man's belt that could have carried something heavy like a sword.
But the archaeology Phil and his team are now carefully unpicking suggests Anglo-Saxon settlement. And Anglo-Saxon settlements and cemeteries don't normally go together. There's clearly been a lot of activity up here, and all of it seems to have occurred inside the massive Iron Age ditch Geophys discovered yesterday.
It almost looks like there's one ditch there and there's another one here, isn't there? So 2 ditches, possibly even 3, in fact, if you count that end grey bit.
And there's no shortage of archaeology or targets down in the Villa Field, where we're hoping to find an Anglo-Saxon settlement.
Tracy, this is the tesserae then?
Yes.
Look what I've just found alongside.
Oh, that's nice. That's got to be hypercourse tile.
Well, that's a good start without digging.
We're now putting in a second trench to look for evidence of day-to-day Saxon life.
No pottery yet.
No?
Not what I'm saying anyway, no.
I'm not a sniff of Saxon again.
Right now.
I think I have got a tiny, weeny little bit of burnt bone out of here as well.
Ooh.
I mean, it looks like a piece of one of the forearm bones.
So you can tell from a piece of bone that small that is a piece of a human forearm.
It's now almost the end of day 2. And thanks to the motorised Lone Ranger of the pottery world, we now have proof that, as well as burials, we have at least one Anglo-Saxon cremation on site.
Oh yeah, that's Saxon.
Oh, jolly good.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's quite nice quality as well. It's early middle, as you'd expect, the sort of thing we're looking for, the handmade stuff.
The problem is, the shape of this feature doesn't match the normal practice of cremated remains buried in a jar or a pot.
What we've got here may not be the remains of a burial. It may be the remains of some other type of cremation-related deposit.
What do you mean? It might be a pyre?
It might be pyre debris. It might be the remnants of a pyre site.
That's really rare, though, isn't it?
It is quite rare, yeah. But that's why, you know, I'm not too worried about that not being part of an urn, but I am interested in what part of the Saxon it's in.
It looks like it's going to be a busy day, because we've established that inside the massive Iron Age ditch is an Anglo-Saxon cemetery with evidence of all sorts of burial rituals. From Jackie's cremation...
I think it is the most gorgeous thing.
Yeah.
...to the grave with our star find, this fantastic gilded brooch.
Is it an equal arm brooch?
It is an equal arm brooch.
These things blow me away. I've only ever seen one of these once before, and that was in 1975, and it was a dig in my own village. I've never ever seen one since. I never ever dreamt that I would be here and actually have one in front of me.
We've so far identified 4 burials in just one small portion of our trench.
Phil, I think we've got something.
And the finds have suggested they all belong to women.
It certainly looks like another brooch, doesn't it? And we've got a little smear of iron there, which is presumably going to be the pin.
That is, until now.
Helen, you know we had 4 burials. It looks like we've actually got a 5th one.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you see, it's actually in here.
Oh, look. Wow. That's a small long brooch, definitely. Can you see that there's a kind of nick down there? So it's going to be what's called a trefoil-headed one, with 1, 2, 3 rounded lobes.
And that is likely to be up on the shoulders here, is it?
Of a woman, though, so up on these shoulders rather than yours.
I don't care what the sex is. I'm worried about the position of the find. But look what we've got this morning. Got this iron thing coming up at that end there.
It's kind of tubular, though, isn't it? Because the obvious thing that looks like is the ferrule off a spear.
Yes. That's what I was working for.
If this is a lady, she should not have a spear.
Pottery.
Pottery as well.
Even at this late stage of the dig, this cemetery trench is still producing new discoveries.
So one end of the ditch is there.
But our other field is also crammed full of archaeology, and it's the big, chunky variety.
Thought it ended here,
Yeah.
but no, the grey fill is going along.
I see.
There's the other end there, a good, what, 7 metres?
We had hoped to find evidence of Anglo-Saxon settlement, or even more burials, near or on top of an earlier Roman villa here. But instead, we seem to have stumbled upon a site that could keep a team of diggers going for a month. But at least we've now solved one mystery in the cemetery. The mystery of the grave with the potential cross-dressing wild women with the brooches and spear.
I can't really see where their heads were, other than just from the grave.
Hang on, you said where their heads were?
Yes.
There's not one person in here, there's 2. We now have only a few hours left of day 3. But with storm clouds looming, the whole dig looks under threat of grinding to a halt. Cool, Matt, have you been upsetting the gods?
This is getting pretty bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Come on, baby, come on. Got it. I've got it.
And all that effort's worth it. Because back in the conservation lab, the brooch, now heavily taped to hold it together, is revealed as a fragile but gobsmacking work of art.
It's pretty impressive, eh, Phil?
It's amazing.
And it looks as if it's pretty well all survived.
Oh. This one here is only the 4th one of this type.
Get out.
Yeah.
The 4th.
To be found in Britain. But it's probably the best of the lot.
It almost seems like a Victorian cemetery, that you've got all these different kinds of burials going on at the same time.
That's a really good analogy, actually, because all of these burials, I think, would have been marked in some way. A little mound, maybe flowers planted on them, something like that that we can't recover archaeologically. And then you've got to imagine the whole thing contained within this big Iron Age earthwork.
As with so many Anglo-Saxon sites, the evidence of settlement has almost completely eluded us. And yet we've still learnt so much from the departed.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses and more. Please join us on this exciting journey. We need more support to make more episodes.
Groby Old Hall lies in Leicestershire, 3 miles from Leicester. And to my mind, it's an archaeological theme park. There's an 18th century farmhouse, graced with the ruins of a magnificent 15th century brick manor. While in the garden, medieval masonry rubs shoulders with a huge mound or motte, the remnants of a Norman castle.
That's a classic motte, and just that big mound of dirt. And then there's a big old bank out here, look, ain't there, look?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot here, and it's all the more tantalising to us as no one knows what these buildings originally looked like or when they were built. So, to launch our attack on this fantastic site, we're starting with what we think was the home of Groby's first residents, the Normans. Geophiz have started to survey the top of the motte to see if they can pick up any evidence of that original castle. But Phil's already ahead of the game, as he thinks he's found our first glimpse of it just down the slope.
That wall.
There's a big stone there.
Well, you know what they say, Phil? 1 stone's a stone, 2 stones a Norman castle.
Or in my neck of the woods, 2 stones is just a couple of stones. But this does look promising, and the perfect place to open our first trench to see if we do have part of the Norman castle and evidence of the Norman family that owned Groby for centuries. A family so powerful that an internationally best-selling novelist has devoted years of research to them.
Fundamentally, this is owned by the Grey family pretty well from the time that the first Grey arrives as a companion of William of Normandy in 1066, and they stay here pretty well to the 20th century.
The Grey family? So is that connected with Lady Jane Grey?
Oh, exactly.
1371, this one is dated, so that's about the same date as the medieval wall that's still standing in the field. So potentially we might be able to find some of these structures in the ground.
Well, you might just be right, Helen. And we're already finding walls in Matt's trench, but it's too early yet to give any dates or say whether this is the hall. Over in Tracy's trench, we've now been digging for over a day, and I would like to have some idea of what's going on. Have you got any idea at all what sort of building this might be?
Well, I think it's probably a chamber block and a 2-storey.
Why do you say it's 2-storey?
Well, it is high status, it's substantially built, but if you look at the window over there by the door, it's only a very small window.
And what's the implication of the tiny window?
Well, if you've got a single-storey building, high status, you'd expect to have a lot more light coming into it.
Oh, I see. That implies that there must be another floor above where all the lords and ladies came.
With the windows in, yeah, the big windows, yeah.
So perhaps we can identify at least part of the home which the Greys lived in the 14th century. A 2-storey chamber block with a top floor where the lords and ladies would have slept. And it's likely to be the white chamber mentioned in the dowry document with a cellar below, possibly the wine cellar. So nearly the end of day 2, and I think our quest to piece together the story of the Greys' homes is looking quite promising.
Oh, look at that. Blimey, it's quite big bits. It's all 15th century and probably the first half.
And whether this is the hall or not, it does look as though it's the same date as Tracy's building, so we do have at least one massive building complex. And Phil's finally got to the bottom of his castle wall. Have you done?
Too right, Tony, and it's been really, really worth it. It's just been an exceptional trench. I don't really want to leave it. I mean, we've known for some while about how this wall was built, So we've got these horizontally bedded stones that make the face on this side and on that side with this massive rubble infill, and then periodically these levelling up courses just to stabilise the whole thing. But the crucial thing that I wanted to know was, what were the foundations like? What was it actually built on?
And what's the answer?
Absolutely solid bedrock.
We already know where the Greys slept. It would have been in this chamber block over here, and we know where they wined and dined the aristocrats in the great hall there. But the one thing that every medieval family was most concerned about was saving their souls. And they wouldn't have done that by praying in the parish church or in some dusty old grotto. They would have had their own chapel, which, like everything else, would have been pretty high status. Now, Helen, this is where we've put in the trench to identify the Great Hall, and down here is this other range or hall that Mick's been talking about with the buttresses, and we're somewhere around here, I think. So where do you think that this chapel might be?
Well, from the Dower documents, we get some idea. The first one says that something is near the chapel as far as the chamber above the hall door. So it's got to be close-ish to the hall, and here's the hall, door's probably down here, so it's in this rough area. Then it goes on to say the chapel of the manor near the close. Now, the close is this enclosed courtyard, so we know it's near there. Now, when we move on to the later one, that says a chapel called the Old Chapel with the cloister by the same towards the south. And if it's towards the south, it's got to be at the end of this passage, one would presume, so somewhere around here.
Which is round about where we are. What do you think of this, Mick?
I think it must be somewhere in this area. I mean, there's a piece of Norman masonry built into the wall here, look.
Where's that?
Next to that black bag, look.
Oh, well, this piece here with the cuts out of it.
It might relate to an earlier building somewhere in this area.
It's not in position, but round the back wall that you can't see from here, you have to go in the garden. We're stood here. On that wall there actually are some sandstone blocks that looks to be in situ as if they're part of an original wall, which might fit with the chapel being this location.
OK, it might be that side of this wall, but it might be this side of the wall. So I think we've got to look both sides with the geophys, you know, to see if we've got the layout either side of that. Somewhere in this area, but either that side or this side.
So the team begin to geophys on this side of the wall and that side of the wall to see if we're anywhere close to being right about the location of the chapel. Because middle of day 3, and what we really need now is another challenge.
That looks awfully like the plinths that were over there, doesn't it? You've got a buttress coming out, and that's what this scar is here, the buttress sticking out. So that would, I think, clearly demonstrate that if the chapel that we're looking for here, or the building we're looking for here, is on the other side of the wall in the gravel garden at the back.
I mean, the radar we did on this side was inconclusive. I mean, we got lots of disturbances we knew, but I'm still convinced if there had been wall lines, we'd have seen them.
Yeah.
And we didn't. So, yeah, all the evidence is saying chapel has to be on the far side.
And if you compare the geophys results from both sides, I think they seal it. The chapel's on that side of the wall. And if it was anywhere near as impressive as the hall's turning out to be, it must have been rather spectacular. Pretty impressive bits of masonry.
They're fantastic, aren't they? This is all part of really good quality window tracery, glazed window. And on this one, you can even see where the masons set out his marks.
I love this V bit on Mick's one.
Well, he's got the top of a mullion in between two window openings.
So like that it would
yeah.
be, so it is.
Yeah. Got a little arch either side of a central upright.
What kind of date do you think these are?
I think these are probably early 14th century.
So how does that tie in with this trench?
That shows us, along with these massive walls, that there's a really big building phase of early 1300s around this rectangular courtyard here.
Yeah.
Is this one of the legendary buttresses?
Yes. And you can see the mason's marks on it as well on the side.
Great, isn't it, that we've got the autograph of one particular worker who was working on this fantastic site.
Yeah. This is clearly a huge building campaign that produces, from what you're showing us, some sort of really posh aristocratic manor house, not necessarily fully fortified, but like a palace almost.
The Greys are doing really well.
They
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But after that, it's demolished and they start to build, presumably, that big house over there. And we're just getting glimpses in each of the trenches of what went on before this lot was put up.
So this is the bailey of the Motte and Bailey Castle?
Yeah, where we've got timber slots and bits of pots and odd little trenches. And we're never going to get a complete plan out of it, but at least we can see a much less regular layout of the buildings in this bailey before they come in. And I mean, this is a mega project.
When the Greys were at the apex of their power. Great result. We now not only know what Groby's buildings looked like, but we can actually chart their history right back to the Norman period. After 1066, Hugh Gromany was given the land and built himself a really substantial Motte and Bailey castle with a stone keep and living quarters in the enclosure surrounding it. And this was the Greys' home until the 14th century, when they decided to upgrade. Most of the buildings that we've excavated seem to have come into use around about the early 1300s. How is that reflected in the history?
Well, we don't have anyone that we can definitely identify as the builder, but we've got here a William Ferrers, who summoned Parliament as Baron of Groby, and he dies in 1325. So this is about the sort of time that you can imagine them going, we've got the name, we've got the position, we're rising in society. What we want is a really nice, big, medieval, you know, style house to kind of back that up, really.
What about when our houses were demolished in the late 1400s, early 1500s? What was going on then?
Well, this comes into the people that I'm really interested in, because Elizabeth Woodville has two boys by John Grey, and one of them is Thomas Grey, and as part of her rise in the royal family, he becomes a marquis. He's given a marquis and he marries an heiress with the title. Maybe he goes, well, I'll start building here again and make this the show house that I want it to be if I'm going to be now a great Tudor magnate, having been a great Plantagenet magnate. So he builds the great brick tower and I think starts work on here.
So he might have demolished all the stuff that we've been excavating then, and that's where we get our brick tower. So perhaps when the Greys' fortunes rose with William Ferrers in the 14th century, they began to build their stunning medieval home with two-storey accommodation, a magnificent great hall and buttressed ranges forming a quadrangle. A property fit for the remarkable Elizabeth Woodville, Queen of England. And later her son, the Marquis Thomas Grey, went one better, demolishing this stone palace and building an even more fashionable brick residence, our 15th century tower.
Time Team is 100% independent and funded by our incredible fans. Want us to make more episodes? Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models, masterclasses and more. And you get to have your say in the process as we develop new sites.
We all know the story. Roman Britain was a thriving, bustling place. But when the Romans left, a bunch of Germans came over, destroyed Romano-British civilization and introduced Saxon culture. Trouble is, there's so little archaeology that we don't know much about this time. That's why people call it the Dark Ages. But in Leicestershire, archaeologists have begun to find some clues. And one of their most promising sites lies here on Nave Hill in a rural part of the Midlands, 11 miles southeast of Leicester. Local archaeologists here have found hundreds of pieces of pot just lying on the surface, and crucially one piece is decorated, pointing to the early Anglo-Saxon period from the 5th to 7th centuries. The good news is the sun looks like it's going to come out.
Yeah.
And we've got 300 manky pieces of pottery. Is that good news as well?
I think that's very good news. We've either got an Anglo-Saxon cemetery or an Anglo-Saxon settlement, and I think my money would be on settlement.
This isn't their picture?
Yes, it's not terribly informative. This dark area might be settlement.
What are we going to do with it?
Well, we've got existing results of field walking, and these dark blue areas coincide with the areas where they found most of the pottery. And what we're hoping is that these actual concentrations are sitting over the top of Saxon buildings. Now, this one here, we're actually looking at it again, and then we'll put in a whacking great trench.
How big?
It's going to be 60 metres long by at least 5 metres wide.
Why so big?
Yeah, it sounds big, doesn't it? But it's really the minimum size. I mean, this is Kettleby, which is a very similar site that was excavated about 10 years ago, very close to here. You realise, well, on this plan, 60 metres, about that long, and plonk it there or there or there, you'd miss everything Anglo-Saxon. But the good thing about Kettleby is that this area of buildings and this one, they're on top of concentrations of pottery. So if we can find out exactly where our concentrations are, drop a trench down on them, we think we have a really good chance of being able to find our buildings.
So we're going to stick a trench in and we're going to come straight down on an Anglo-Saxon building. Aren't you being a tiny bit Mary Poppins? If you think of the number of Anglo-Saxon sites we've dug on Time Team over the years, and what do we get? Stains in the ground.
If we're lucky.
Isn't this going to be another 3 days of hell?
Well, what's the alternative, though? I mean, this is a pivotal point in our country's past, and we have a duty to investigate sites like this. This site needs investigation. The alternative is just to give up.
I've found buildings like that, and every time I see one laid out in the ground, I get a tingle up my spine.
Geophys get going with the huge task of investigating the hill. The aim is to locate the best place for a huge 60-metre trench. We're hoping that together the geophysics and pottery scatter will lead us to identify some post holes, holes in the ground that once held timber posts. These would have supported distinctive Saxon buildings, either halls or buildings called grub huts built over a pit. But before we even start digging, some amazing geophysics results throw a spanner in the works. Any joy, John?
We certainly
wow,
have.
look at that. That's very good.
That is really exciting. But it doesn't say Anglo-Saxon to me.
I thought the Anglo-Saxons liked circular structures.
But we don't get ditches like that around either settlements or cemeteries, do we?
Oh, what's that? What then, what's that? How old is it?
Oh, it's a rim as well, look at that.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's beautiful, look at that.
How old?
Well, it's early mid-Saxon, so what, you know, 450, 850.
Wait till Tony hears this. Eddie was so sceptical as hell this morning.
He's
gonna eat some humble poyetto oil if they have anything to do with it.
Incredibly, on day one, we've hit Saxon post holes, dated by pottery in them. If they are from a building, it suggests there's a Saxon settlement here. And we now think the pottery must have come from a settlement, not a cemetery, as metal detectorists haven't unearthed any metal grave goods. It's not long before Phil uncovers even more post holes in the ground. Phil, you've got lots of little white flags. Have you found something?
It's a row of post holes, Tony. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, possibly a 7th, all in a line. And 1, 2, 3 of them have got enormous sherds of Saxon pottery in them.
When you say post holes, if they're all in a line like that, why couldn't that be a fence?
The thing is that the spacings between individual posts is so close that I don't think it is a fence. The only time I've ever seen anything like this before, it was in a Saxon building. And of course, having got these bits of pottery in them does suggest to me that we could be in a settlement, not out in the middle of a field.
In 15 years of Time Team, can you ever remember us having a robust Anglo-Saxon house?
No, but I can think of many, many times when we've looked for one.
Do you think this is a building?
I think it's a very good chance that that's exactly what we're looking at. It's a real stroke of luck to find an alignment of post holes like this with, as Phil says, well-dated pottery right in the surface.
Was this on a geophys?
No, it's not. But remember, this trench was placed here because of the dense concentration of Saxon pottery.
So it really is luck? You just scraped away?
It was not lucky. It was the dense concentration of Saxon pottery. It was you who was dubious about it.
We've got lots of responses, and these look quite interesting. Whether they're small enclosures, pits, it's got to be worth trying to date these.
So have you got a likely place that you'd like us to look at there?
Well, I think if we went into that sort of corner there where we've got a ditch turning.
OK, well, let's mark that out and let's get a hole in and see what it is. Keep our fingers crossed it's Saxon.
So Tracy and Ian moved to open Trench 3 near the top of the hill. Stuart and historian Sam Newton are out investigating our hill's position in the landscape. There are Saxon-named villages around our site called the Langtons.
Church Langton, East Langton, West Langton, Thorpe Langton.
Langton.
What does, I mean, is Langton any Saxon derivations at all?
Oh, Langton is the long enclosure, like Longtown.
Longtown, right.
The Langtons are separated from Nave Hill by a river with a ford linking them. This river was once the boundary of the Hundred, a Saxon administrative area.
I love these old routes where they've almost got forgotten now. You almost can imagine yourself walking the same route as all those generations.
Or in our case, a Land Rover.
Yeah, footbridge. This is a good place to see the site from, isn't it, Sam? You can see the people walking along the horizon up there.
Work up there.
Where I've brought you, we sort of drove along through the Langtons up there. There's a site there to Thorpe Langton, and we're at that crossing here of the river. Although this stream looks fairly insignificant now, you can see on the map it's a major topographic boundary. It's also a 100 boundary. Everything seems to be coming together, converging at this point. We've got a major river crossing, we've got major Saxon territorial administrative boundaries, we've got routes all coming together, and on the skyline up there is a settlement that we're digging.
So the river was a boundary in Saxon times. Routeways led to the ford crossing, from which the hill occupied a prominent position, suggesting an important site. And on the hill, Phil's revealing more evidence of a Saxon structure.
Cracking post hole, this one, Jackie. What's yours shaping up like?
Well, it's not the same shape as yours for a start off, but which might be a good thing. You know, it's not as deep as that. I think I'm getting close to the bottom here, but it's really horrible stuff down the bottom. I'm not entirely convinced I'm quite there yet. It's very, very mixed material.
The other thing too about them is the size of them. They're much, much bigger. Look at that third one there.
Yeah, they're quite substantial, aren't they?
They got to be structural.
Either that or it's a damn big fence.
This ain't a fence.
Not very likely, is it?
Not only that, if it was a fence, you'd expect to see it running on in both directions.
Yeah.
This is a discrete set of post holes. I'm sure it must be one side of a building.
Yeah.
So, not a fence, but a wall. We still need more evidence to be sure there was a Saxon settlement here. And at the far end of Trench 1, Matt's just beginning to unearth something.
Paul, have you got a couple of minutes?
Yes, mate.
I'm just half sectioning this bit of pit that's coming out.
Oh, fantastic.
And yeah, there you go. Let's get that. That's the biggest bit I've seen on the site so far.
Well, that's not Saxon. I've seen that one cleaned up, but that's Iron Age, I think.
Right.
Absolutely typical. Just like so many times before on Time Team, we look for a Saxon settlement and come up with something else. But then more pottery surfaces on top of the hill.
Ooh,
Well, however much I'd like, I can't make that into...
Don't try this at home, kids. Yeah, that's Iron Age.
Oh, gosh, that's fabulous. Now, that wasn't quite the rim I was expecting.
That's fabulous.
There you go.
There it is, yeah. That's
What do you make of that?
Well, again, it doesn't look wheel thrown, does it? It's beautifully made.
Yeah.
So, great finds we'd be proud of on any dig. And the geophysics results keep leading us to fascinating Iron Age features. But these results and finds aren't helping us find the Saxon site. And in our quest for a Saxon settlement, there's another surprise. The best part of 8 hours ago, you said that they were going to start to excavate this grub hut.
Yeah.
Well, they don't look like they've done very much.
No, they finished it.
You're kidding?
Yeah, but it's not there.
There isn't a grub hut?
There isn't a grub hut.
You're joking?
No, I mean, we saw this rectangular stain, and the guy that's dug a lot of them locally said, yeah, he thought it probably was that. But when we emptied it, you see, it's only about 6 inches deep, and it's actually over the top of a late Roman ditch. So it's not a grub hut at all. We've lost that.
I can hardly hear what you're saying. My head is ringing with guilt after I bigged up this idea that we got the greatest Anglo-Saxon site we'd ever found.
Well, we may still have, because you remember the posts over here?
I do.
Well, this is the row here, look.
They've come on, haven't they?
Yeah.
What about this one here? This is huge.
That's produced Anglo-Saxon pottery as well, and that may be the doorway through the side wall of this building.
Could be the doorway of a fence.
No, because if you come here, which might be the corner post, you can see there are other post holes going off at right angles to this row.
One there, yeah.
Yeah, and we're working on the basis that these buildings are often sort of 4 metres wide and 10 metres long. And then you see Phil's working at the top end there on what might be the corner post 10 metres away that way.
Phil, does that look to you like a corner post?
I've definitely got a post hole here, Tony, but whether it's the corner, that I can't be sure. You could remember, it could even be longer, this building.
Blimey.
But the problem is, you see, we've got a big area that we haven't dug there,
yeah,
which is where the side wall will be if it goes up that way.
But it ought to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we ought to find the other post somewhere around here.
That's right. So that would be the side wall, that would be the end wall.
And if we find another post here, then we could have our very first Anglo-Saxon hall.
Absolutely, yeah.
And in our search for traces of the Anglo-Saxons, our last trench keeps on giving. We've only got a few hours left, and people are working frantically hard in this trench. Raksha, anything else come up?
Well, we've had a great flurry of activity, and we have evidence of occupation here.
Go on.
See this red patch around here?
Yeah.
That's evidence of burning. And the question is it a hearth? We don't know. We need to investigate that. I know we don't have very much
2
time.
hours. 2 hours. So not just another building in our Saxon settlement, but very rare evidence of Saxon occupation. But just how many people gathered around fires on Nave Hill? One thing that seems blindingly obvious about this landscape is that there are hardly any people in it. Would it have been the same in Anglo-Saxon times?
No, there were a lot more people in the Anglo-Saxon times. Maybe there were up to about 100 people on this site alone, and then we've got all sorts of other sites up the valley.
I still find it hard to believe what it would have been like with 100 Anglo-Saxons living just down there. Do we know from the documents what they might have been doing?
Well, we know for one thing from the language and the poetry that they really knew how to have a good time. And we know that as a primarily agricultural economy, the agricultural year would have been punctuated with the festivals, with great parties.
So Anglo-Saxon life wouldn't have been as bleak and horrible as the phrase Dark Ages leads us to believe.
Absolutely, yeah. The Dark Ages is really a complete misnomer. They were prospering in a very rich agricultural environment. Now, the word celebration was certainly one they knew a lot about.
These party-loving Anglo-Saxons have left their mark on the modern population. And several weeks ago, we submitted a DNA sample from Phil Harding to investigate whether he's descended from Saxon immigrants or the native British. And on our catering van, we've had a sweepstake as to Phil's ancestry. Phil, come here.
You got the results?
Your DNA's come.
You look a bit nervous.
Well, there's a sort of certain element of trepidation, really.
On your mother's side, we looked at the mitochondrial DNA and we found that you're a descendant of a woman who lived 20,000 years ago in the Dordogne.
Yes, I like it, I like it.
Why do you like it so much?
Hey.
Why the fist in the air?
Because they were good flint knappers in the Dordogne 20,000 years ago. Yes, I knew there was. See, that's where I get it from.
Her descendants moved up following the herds of big game and eventually crossed into Britain. So I think from this result, it looks as though your maternal ancestor was one of the first people to come to Britain after the last ice age.
See? Good stuff.
So you're not Roman?
You're not Roman there.
God, it's getting getting better. It's getting better.
Oh, so at the male side to go.
So that's on the female side.
So far,
We've
so
also
good.
looked at your Y chromosome, which is coming down your male side. You got it from your father, who got it from his father, and back and so forth.
Tell me it's Roman.
No,
And there's a very clear signal in some cases of Roman.
No,
Y chromosome,
you're not having
but
me.
not in yours. Not in yours.
Yeah.
Which makes you a Celt.
Well, I am.
You're positively prehistoric. It seems Phil couldn't be more British if he tried. But is he representative of the modern population?
The genetic bedrock, if you like, of the whole of Britain and Ireland is Celtic. The Saxons and the Vikings really only contribute up to 10-20%.
So they were the sort of basic sort of invaders then that settled in amongst the Celtic people that were already living
and they
here.
didn't displace them. They didn't push them off into Wales and Scotland, as the common myth says. They didn't kill them all either. They just
Come on,
mixed in.
the Celts weren't here from the year dot. You were an invader too.
But we were amongst the first people to colonise it. You've heard what he's just said.
Certainly on your mother's side, that's almost certainly true.
Yeah.
So the land belongs to you, eh? Does it?
Yes.
There's a few flies in your jam pot.
Yeah. Get off my land.
If you want to know more about DNA and your heritage, visit the Time Team website. Phil's ancestors were here when the Saxons arrived with their distinctive Germanic building designs. And after finding even more post holes, we can finally begin the job of recreating the building we've found.
Now here, on this side, you'll notice that there are these two post holes.
So Phil's showing the layout off to our designer, Raysan.
And we think this might have been more likely where the doorway comes in.
Okay.
So that you could actually come in and your wall line might even be somewhere slightly inside of that.
And that's on an east-west axis, is it?
The actual main building is east-west, yeah.
15 years and at last we've got this, Time Team's first Anglo-Saxon hall. Phil, are you now absolutely confident that we've got our Anglo-Saxon hall?
Absolutely confident, Tony. In fact, I'm so confident that I decided to stand in the middle of it.
Doesn't it make you feel chuffed that after 15 years, we've finally got one?
It's been worth the wait, though, hasn't it, eh?
Not half. And just when we think our site couldn't possibly deliver any more...
I don't know what the end's going to look like.
It's quite extraordinary, that.
Well, it's so well fixed in, but look, can you see? That's definitely been polished, look.
Do you know, is that bone or...?
It could be bone. It's very dark.
I think it's a needle. There's one very like that from Kettleby.
There we are.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Oh, look, it's got a little perforation on one end.
No, it's one of those big needles.
So what would they have used that for then?
Well, something coarse, something like nets or something like that. I'm
Like
guessing.
fishing nets?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, because that would go that quite well, wouldn't it? Sort of winding through those
Yes.
nets.
As day 3 comes to an end, we found a preserved piece of early Anglo-Saxon life. Archaeologists in Britain have found very few buildings and settlements from the so-called Dark Ages, but at Nave Hill, Time Team have found 2 extremely rare Saxon structures. They'd have been nestled within a substantial community where people lived and worked, leaving us a few precious glimpses of their lives. Raksha, has this trench come up to expectations?
This trench has been nothing short of fantastic. We know that Saxon people lived and worked here in the 7th century. We have pottery dating to that. And also out of one of the post holes, we found this fantastic bow needle.
What a lovely way to end the day. The Anglo-Saxon period is one of the most important times in English history, but the archaeology from it is frustratingly hard to find. Hopefully, though, here at Nave Hill, we've managed to get a little bit closer to the people who decided to make their home here 1400 years ago.
Hello, my name's John Gator. Time Team is fan-funded by Patreon. This vital support helps us to make new episodes. Joining Patreon gives you access to exclusive interviews, 3D models and masterclasses, plus lots more.